PoC Cunt-Slime Power against predatory capitalism, or the desire to penetrate potato synapses until they bleed. Have fun. I am Mateja, and when I tell people my name, they mostly ask me where I'm from. If I'm in a good mood, I say, from my mother's cunt. As a female ghetto-lectural Azlag, a double B Balkan Berlin scumbag Kanak, I only trust facts, not colonial ideological wet dreams, thought up by the mistress and master race who for thousands of years has defended and consolidated its power by imposing mental and geographical borders. You must do this and you mustn't do that. You can't set your toe on our piece of land, but only if we can exploit you for cheap labor. And be aware if you don't celebrate Christmas. For those who do not know what Christmas is, a brief elaboration. Christmas is the first Me Too scandal that has been passed down in written form. A rich guy with ego problems who lives in the clouds rapes a woman probably after slipping her knockout drops because Mary, that's the woman's name, can't remember how she got pregnant. She has the child Jesus, who later becomes a leading guru and hangs out with a crowd who are always going on about loving thy neighbor. The hippies back then had better drugs than they do today. These days, if I took ayahuasca, I wouldn't end up preaching about love. Instead, me and the world would just revolve egocentrically around myself and I'd end up vomiting on my shoes. But back then, people saw burning bushes and wrote books and fairy tales that still are relevant today. Has anyone read better storybooks than the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah? No? I have to admit I haven't either. They're too long. I'd rather watch The Terminator, James Bond, or other light-skinned men save humanity from evil. Thank God for strong, white, straight men. Without Jesus, Terminator, James Bond, or Andy Scheuer, we'd probably all be dead already. But where was I? Ah, yes, what I say when someone asks me where I'm from. Well, because I'm not into patriarchal esotericism, I prefer to stick to the facts and say that I came from the origin of the world, a vagina. We should all rely more on facts than ideologies, especially when we take a closer look at where the ideologies of European borders originated. They were determined by European royal families, the houses of Bourbon, Windsor, Habsburg, and so on, a phlegmatic, incestuous bunch. People whose brains resembled Gouda, because that's what happens when family members exchange body fluids for generations and produce babies. My point is that these borders were made by imbecilic, spoiled, snotty men whose only full-time activity was being a son. Back to the question, where do you really come from? No, I mean really. Well, if I'm not in a good mood, I say from my father's asshole. I can really recommend you this phrase if the person asking has bad breath or simply doesn't understand structural racism. We minorities have to protect ourselves and develop strategies so that we can extricate ourselves gallantly from unpleasant situations. Otherwise, the vampires will suck us dry of our culture and energy. To all of you out there who are thinking vampires do not exist, I have to disappoint you. They are everywhere, and they love minorities. Germany needs us. The AfD needs us to spread hate and to use us for their failures. It's too easy to always find fault in others, never in yourself. Without minorities, the AfD would not exist because Germany would not exist either. We helped rebuild this country and are still doing so. The entire German middle class would collapse if all the care workers vanished from old people's homes, along with all the nurses from hospitals, the mostly Eastern Bloc, illegal cleaners, the unlawful hookers and cheap labor in brothels. When was the last time you saw a German builder, taxi driver or cleaner? The German art scene needs us too, so that mediocre privileged white directors finally have a topic they can get worked up about, and as a reason to apply for extra funding. We minorities are mutating into exotic animals in boring zoos, but we mustn't open our mouths if we are exploited, stereotyped on stage or sold as labels. The only good migrant is a silent migrant, which is particularly true for women. Women who open their mouths are branded as difficult, arrogant or self-righteous. Witch burnings still take place. In the arts, women are burned by having their voices taken away if they speak their minds in public. And the mind of a woman of color can be very unpleasant because she is at the bottom of the food chain, a place where vital questions are at stake, like how to survive. Even the left needs us so that they can fight for something, against something, no matter why or where to. The main thing is to keep going. We are their mascots. That's the one thing they agree on. But the unity ends when it comes to Israel-Palestine issues. Then there's hell in paradise in the left electoral sky. And the upper class needs us too, because as long as everybody is bashing someone else's head in, they can jet around the world and distribute non-vegan, non-fair trade breast milk. A system that suppresses other people, resources and animals to maintain its superiority makes the successful human mutate into a predator. Predators' brains are programmed to hunt prey, to get energy through food intake. The predator is not interested in what the prey thinks. The prey is just an object needed by the predator for its own survival. Eat or be eaten. Like predators, humans' eyes are positioned at the front of our heads, unlike animals of flight, whose eyes are positioned on the side to help them see better while fleeing. Human beings invented predatory capitalism for fear of losing their livelihoods. And white Western patriarchal society has perfected the system of exploiting the small and the weak. It is so entrenched in our everyday life that we tend not to see it. Evil is not a monster that devours minorities. Evil is everyday racism that is so banal it's hardly visible to privileged white people. I grew up in Bavaria, Franconia. Of course. My history or German teacher, I don't remember who exactly as I've suppressed many things from that period, always emphasized that Erlangen is in Franconia, not Bavaria. From then on, I realized that ethnicity is an important issue in the Free State of Bavaria and in Germany in general. Here it is much more important if your ancestors were real Nazis in the 30s, so that you count as a real German today. Nowadays, if you look like a descendant from someone who was in the Hitler Youth, you're much less likely to have your head shoved against the curb by the police for no reason, be spat at in the street, or be told to go back where you came from, etc. We are no longer the country of poets and thinkers, but a country of middle-class anal retentives. We obviously have enough money to hire too many police officers with too much time on their hands, and we're terrified of people whose washing powder does not smell like ours. Actually, we're terrified and paranoid in general, sometimes even of our own families and their expectations, or of seeing the inherited trauma of war in our mother's eyes. Many keep silent about it, especially women. Maybe silence is part of the German DNA, just like watching the show Tatort. The word German in Yugoslavian is Niemac, which means deaf mute. And Germany is called Njemačka, which means the country of the deaf-mute people. We often stay silent in Germany because we are afraid, But every single one of us who stays silent about injustice takes the side of the oppressors. And there's a lot of injustice here. Germany is a country where football players switch to another club for millions of euros and care workers for older people and nurses live just above the subsistence level and wring their backs. Germany is also a country where racism or power structures in societies are not subjects taught in school. In Germany, it's more important to learn the rules by heart than to question them. And above all, it is important to be insured, preferably against everything, vet bills, legal action, death. It's important to keep a constant eye on things and on the borders. The only question is, how safe is security? Does it save our lives or make us stagnate mentally? Because everything, all of a sudden, our entire lives and interactions with non-Germans seems unsafe. I wonder how Stone Age people were able to survive without German insurance. Life is easy when you divide the world into safe and unsafe. But you can only rule if you divide. It's an old principle. Excuse me for moaning so much. Perhaps it's the first stage towards my assimilation into Germany. I also want to highlight the positive aspects. If Germany were all bad, people wouldn't keep risking their lives to come here. I too fled here illegally, hidden under my grandmother's skirt. Perhaps without Germany I would be dead too, as are many other children at the sea or the European borders, which are protected by German weapons, which never point at the people who produce them. To the masters and mistresses reenacting George Orwell's Animal Farm in the nice theaters discuss whether in a few years' time EU will have to erect memorials to the missing children, to the drowned human beings, and to the refugees abused at their borders. Do they think about who to aim their profitable weapons at, whose bullets never pump holes in their own faces or those of their families? At any rate, the master race is considering how to secure power through weapons. If empathy dies, then Europe, the mother of democracy, dies. Then there will be no more room for the perspectives of minorities. Then there will only be room for the opinion of the rulers. To strengthen democracy, you have to show solidarity with minorities and give them space in which to communicate their perspective. Democracy means empathy. Empathy means that everyone here in this room first disinfects their hands before reaching out. First disinfects their hands with themselves before reaching out. Empathy means identifying the predator in yourself, the one who exploits other living beings and resources to lead a comfortable life, and then slowly grows tame. Discover the tiger in you.